Yes.
Joining us now to review some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Arise News analyst Emmanuel Ifeni. Great Malabite.
Good morning, Ruben.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Without L.
Morning.
Yes, we'll start the review with this day, Nigeria's newspaper of record. The lead story, CSU, Chicago State University. Tinubu, our graduate. But we didn't issue diploma he submitted to INEC. Matter is frivolous, distracting, says Foreign Affairs Minister. President's certificate not forged, insists presidency. Atiku to hold world press conference today. Supreme Court will do Nigeria a great disservice to ignore CSU's deposition, where the Chicago State University made that clear deposition. Yes, Tinubu, so graduate. The person who is the president of Nigeria today was our student. He graduated here. But the diploma he submitted to INEC didn't emanate from us. Now, the PDP and his presidential candidate in the last presidential election, Atiku Abubakar, they have the papers they've been asking for all this while. What will happen? Well, Atiku billed to address a world press conference today, but a world press conference is not the Supreme Court. Will those papers be tendered at the Supreme Court? Will the Supreme Court be admitting this evidence and make pronouncement based on the findings, the revelations, the observations from these documents? I'm sure even the lawyers, they were tongue-tied when they were asked this question a short while ago. The lawyers on this program, I mean. So we'll wait. We'll hear from Atiku Abubakar today in that world press conference, and of course, how he takes these papers further if that will be presented to the Supreme Court. But I'll be surprised if to Atiku and his team, there's nothing serious in these papers, and have made so much strenuous effort to get these papers. And if indeed there was nothing to this paper, how come there was so much effort also to stop the release of these documents, as the legal team of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu argued that it will cause irreparable harm to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu if these papers are released. They have been released. So we'll await what follows next. Now, the Vanguard newspaper reporting this story states, the Vanguard newspaper reporting this story below the photograph. Presidency, Atiku disagree over certificate Tinubu submitted to INEC. Now, the lead story of the Vanguard newspaper states split over federal government 35,000 wage award to federal workers. Will key into federal government template. Enugu, Edo, Ondo, Ekiti, Kebbi, Delta, Oyo, Adamawa, others to negotiate with workers. Federal government can't dictate to us what to pay. Niger government. Well, the Guardian newspaper, crisis looms in universities over mass exodus of lecturers. Breakdown of IP salary payments based on Conwas 2 of 2019. Yes, if you look at the figures there, what lecturers earn, graduate assistants, 123,170 naira, while of course the professors, the highest grade there, 342,444,000 naira. That's what they earn. But the federal government has just given a 35% increase, which it approved. As soon as that is implemented, of course, there will be an increase in what lecturers are receiving. But the story is that lecturers are leaving in droves, are leaving the system. Well, part of the problem of persistent strike and government underfunding of the public university system. Where are they rushing to? Of course, many of them are also going to private universities in the country, and others are leaving the country altogether. Now, the Punch newspaper, economic crisis. States borrow 46 billion naira from banks to pay salaries. The Punch newspaper. Across, of course, Access, Fidelity, Zenith lend states 46 billion naira in 6 months to governors. Battle poor to governors as the battle poor IGRO, internally generated revenue. Fiscal Responsibility Commission issues guidelines to banks on lending to states and MDAs. Now, the Business Day newspaper, uproar in oil sector after NNPC favors MRS AA Reno again. Yes, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited has awarded new contracts to 4 companies, including 2 downstream firms, for the rehabilitation of the country's pipelines, sparking criticism from industry operators. I'm sure they have their grounds and issues with the contract. The New Telegraph newspaper, why coups are spreading in Africa by U.S. Consul General, list flooding, pollution, food security, perpetuity in power as part of continent's challenges. Yes, those supposedly democratically elected presidents who want to continue as monarchs by tweaking the constitution to continue in office are part of the problem in Africa. Now, the Daily Independent newspaper, why coups are sweeping across Africa, U.S. Consul General. The same story there. But the story below the photograph, IOC's investment shows indigenous firms have come of age. NCDMB says production deficit caused by lack of major investment. Yes, when the IOCs are leaving major part of the operation, yes, the locals are taking over, but are they investing as much as will change the narrative in the oil and gas sector? Nigerian Tribune newspaper, how Nigeria, other African countries can avert lost decade. World Bank projects 2.9% growth for Nigeria economy. 0.12 million young Africans entering labor market each year. Excuse me. Now, the Daily Sun newspaper, tragedy in Senate. Kaduna ministerial nominee slumps while being grilled by senators. Journalist collapses in National Assembly, dies. 3 nominees confirmed. Yes, a journalist collapsed yesterday, and perhaps there was no sugar, there was no water. He died in that process. Well, in the case of the ministerial nominee, well, he came back to his feet, and the circumstances surrounding his appearance, he was informed late, had to leave Kaduna, and they were asked to come by 9 a.m. Somebody even suggested he must be fasting. Perhaps he did not take his breakfast, or took his toll on him, as a senator from his state was even commending him and asking the Senate to consider him and approve his nomination. He collapsed, but thank God he came back and was able to speak. And the doctor that attended to him said, well, it was just fatigue, that indeed there's nothing actually wrong with him health-wise. Now, we go to the foreign newspaper, the Times of London. Son of pharmacist cast himself as Tasha's hair. Yes, talking about the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Prime Minister unveils platform to shatter 30-year consensus. Cameroon condemns decision to curb HS2. Yes, Rishi Sunak delivered his speech yesterday at the Conservative Conference. But I think he seemed to have turned the conservatives down the line, and there's big schism within the Democratic Party, within the Conservative Party in the UK. And the Independent newspaper reporting that story, Sunak's big speech goes up in smoke as after keynote Tory conference address, two former prime ministers publicly opposed Rishi's plan to ask the HS2 extension to Manchester and ban smoking altogether. Well, now the Financial Times, Ukraine set for 186 euro payout if it joined EU. Study says Brussels modeling of expansion plan, many states to become net payers. Now, the Washington Post, what is happening in the U.S. Congress? Speaker, battle begins as House tries to regroup, of course, after the removal of Kevin McCarthy. Now, two House of Rep members, Majority Leader, who's actually the second in command, has announced his bid, as well as Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, is also a long-term conservative gadfly who has taken the case against Biden's son very seriously. Both of them are in the running to become the next Speaker of the U.S. Congress, Ruben, Rufai, and Ayo.
Well, brief things. The first one, which will interest you, the World Cup for, I think, 2030. Yeah. They are now saying it will be in 3 continents, in 6 different countries. So the World Cup is going to go all over the place. Yeah. I know you are a football.
That is the World Cup. The World Cup should be played around the world.
I know you are a football aficionado.
I think it's a good innovation.
That will keep you really busy during that time. Because I know you like to watch football.
Taking the World Cup to where it started, Uruguay. Yes. The first match of that World Cup will be played in Uruguay.
Spain, Argentina.
That's where it all started. The first World Cup was played in Uruguay.
Yeah. Now, that's that about that. You know, it's good to see that football fans are excited by that possibility, as has been published. Now, about state governments, the story you refer to.
Yes.
State governments in Nigeria between January and July were told borrowed over 47 billion.
Yes, that's the Punch newspaper, if you just put it up there.
And, you know, these states are borrowing more money in spite of the fact that we're told that the federal allocation, FAC allocation, has gone up and they are getting more money from the federal government. But this excuse that is given in that story is that all of these states, you know, there's no, the IGR, the internally generated revenue, is very low. And this is a point we always make, that many of these states are not viable. Many of these states are centers only of consumption, not production. This was not the case during the First Republic. It wasn't this bad during the Second Republic. And it's a reflection of the fact that we're further degenerating in this country. State governments are just borrowing. So they spend their 4 years or 8 years, as the case may be, they leave debt for people. And I think it's important that in that same story, they've been reminded of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007, which puts a cap on how much you can
and banks will take note.
Yes, but in this case, you know, nobody respects that. As for Sunak, you were saying his speech went up in smoke. Well, he was making policy statements, and he was telling the conference, the Conservative Party conference, that he's a man who can bring change. The major controversy is about the HS2, the high-speed rail line to the north, from West Midlands to Manchester. And we have made the point here, how the mayor of Manchester kicked, how the mayor of West Midlands also kicked, you know. But it's just politics. But would this help him achieve his ambition? He says he's scrapping the HSC, he's replacing it, you know, with another kind of exam.
He wants to ban smoking altogether.
He wants to ban smoking going into the future. So these are some of the issues there. But this has been quite a controversial conference, with Sunak being challenged by certain other persons.
The son of the pharmacist.
It was David Cameron, you know, you were referring to, who was saying that, look, this HS2 was the product of consensus within the party, and it's not something that you can just take away like that. But in any case, we'll watch What lesson can we take from the UK? That their conference is about ideas. Kemi Badnoch talking about Brexit, Suella Braverman talking about migration or immigration, the Prime Minister himself talking. When your own people here hold a party conference, the only thing you hear is about bags of money moving up and down. I think it's a crying shame.
Doctor, but you're too violent.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fake.